Hi, how's it in the name of Christ? How you doing? It's your girl Cake Karabo. I hope you're good. I hope you're peachy. I hope you're Stella, and I hope you're in a neat little bunch. If you're not, welcome to the party. Is that just not the story of our lives? So today is the 15th of April 2025. Yesterday I forgot to say the date, so I'm saying it today. And it's a relative whatever, it's a persecuting day, okay? There's like a lot going on cosmically, and I am here to talk about that. I did make mention in yesterday's video that I am going to be recording pretty much daily or as frequently as I can in order for me to overcome this hurdle. I've just come out of a horrible space, a terrible environment, and I guess that's what we're gonna talk about today. But before getting into that, I guess want to put some caveats out there. Okay, so look, I said that I'm not going to do very many edits, but it appears I'm a creature of habit. I do have my computer, and I do have this phone on which I'm recording, even though there is another phone over here that I'm exporting from. So I very potentially might still engage in the laborious editing that I tend to engage in anyway. I don't know, but I think I've found a faster way to work, especially when I don't have animation. So maybe the thing that's gonna get my content posted faster is eradication of animation more than it is just eradication of like content, you know, like editing quality. I don't know, we'll see. So I may potentially have captions or not, because on the previous video I said that I wouldn't have captions, I wouldn't have this and that, and lo and behold, look, there were captions. But then again, maybe that's because it was only one part. Usually I do very many parts, part 1, part 2, part 10, so I don't know, depending really. But I certainly am going to maintain a certain level of giftedness in terms of editing, because I see now that I can. I've been editing largely on my cell phone devices, but I realize that I have my computer, so for the work that I'm using as interludes in the center, then we're gonna use a computer. Okay? Yes, I have to get stuff off my chest. I'm newly exited or escaped out of a crazy environment, and I'm here to try and counsel, I suppose, anyone that will hearken, whoever will be here that will listen with a good ear, concerning that. I do have enemies that are perpetually pursuing me, but that's what we're talking about, okay? From what the Lord showed me eventually, I'm going to get hearkened to. So it makes no sense at all for me to just speak to my violent enemies, my crazy enemies, because there will at some point be individuals that actually take my content and run with it and enable themselves along, find healing. So we will speak to that healing component of stuff. I'm sorry if my hair is a distraction. It is a mess. I don't have time to get around to constantly bringing down my protective cells and putting them back up again, because my life is hard, and when you're in a lot of pain you don't have time to like groom and etiquette and whatnot. Insofar as it's neat, insofar as it's not neat, it's not that neat, but it's there, it's not falling off. That's all that matters. One day I'll get around to my hair. Not that I have to apologize, but listen guys, the topic of today, as you can see on my added timestamp, I added a timestamp, it didn't come with the application. It is the 15th of April, I did say that. I suppose the topic will be, this is how you escape, or this is how you run. Yeah, this is how you run, this is how you escape. Some variation of that, that's the topic of the day. Kindly gaze at my scripture of the day as well. It's probably swinging left and right over here. I made a decision I'm going to keep that because it's a beautiful feature. Why get rid of it if it is beneficial? And if there are captions, note that they are not always accurate. They're auto-generated by an application, and I don't have an incentive to edit them because I don't get viewed. So on the day when I have a proper audience, we will gaze at those captions and see if we can't create them. But before then, they're just gonna stick around. I don't really have anything else to add as a caveat, so let's just get straight into it. Okay, so it is 2025, you guys, and I'm a godly woman. I'm a child of the living God, but this issue that I am addressing is not only the problem of godly women, but it is, I would go so far as to say, by far, the best survived by godly women. It's written in Psalm 91 that 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. And I am a witness, testimony of the veracity of that. So for those of you who have no awareness, I shall put it out there. I am from South Africa. Okay, before I get into that, This is a new ministry where I'm posting anew, but please look down below in the description box if you want the last place that I come from, my old ministry. I had to flee that. I had to leave for the very reasons that I am present. I had to leave that space for the very reasons that I am presently expanding on. Okay, the very thing that I'm here talking about is the reason why I'm no longer in my old ministries. The youngest, their ministry was about 2 years old. The oldest was about 10. I had 5 channels, and I have spent 10 years, that is, all those 10 years in flight from the very epidemic that I'm presently going to speak about right now. So look at the description box below. There will be a link to my old channel. I am very persecuted by miscreants at YouTube that are going against company policy. They are not the decision. They're acting independent of YouTube's decisions. They're rogue. What I'm trying to get at is that there are people who are rogue at YouTube who get paid bribes by individuals that are super corrupt in my country. So this is not a YouTube problem. YouTube has its issues, but this here is not one of them. Okay, it has its censorship random agendas every so often up its sleeves, but this is not one of those cases. Coupled with the fact that Donald Trump, the president of the US, signed an executive order essentially banning all manner and kinds of religious persecution on American platforms or on in American spaces, and YouTube is an American space. So perhaps maybe under the Biden administration, this might have been feasibly a blame on YouTube, but it is not anymore. I am suffocating under tyranny and oppression alongside corruption from South Africa, and the parties that be, the powers that be here, that thanks to America setting base camp in their country with social media platforms and creating employment, they then went and took advantage of that and walked in a corrupt fashion. So it's corrupt South Africans that are messing with my life on an American platform. They are soon going to be uprooted. Therefore, this issue that I am challenged by is not going to be maintained as a problem that I am challenged by. But in the run-up to, let it be known that the very thing that I'm talking about right now is that issue. The fact that it is very easy for a certain kind of men in this country to essentially enable their cause along at the violent expense of women, sometimes even using women. The biggest of my perpetrators in terms of YouTube employees is a woman, and worse, a black woman, and she is enabling a cause or an agenda that is antagonized to the well-being of black women, especially in my country. So she is a betrayer and a hypocrite against her own gender. But with any rotten ecosystem, there will always be psychopaths that are dangled nothing but a carrot of money in order to abandon any kind of virtue or value. So women can literally abandon or ditch the cause of women in totality, insofar as there is a carrot dangled in front of them. And that's why you have women who work as madam brothels. They own brothels that human traffic women, and they are unfazed by the fact that they have a little mansion where they live comfortably with their girl children while they subjugate the girl children of other men and women to the tyranny of sex trafficking. There are women who work in places where women ought not work, but they're chased along by nothing but money. Yeah, so I need to put this out there that the battle that I am in right now is a battle for women, by women, enabled sometimes even by the loving, doting arms of better men. But it is, unfortunately, if you live in a country like South Africa, our problem alone, with nobody coming through for us. So let me just put that out there. I am a South African woman. And let me just throw some stats out there for you. This nation that is South Africa is frankly presently quite dastardly politically. It is being shown flames on the international landscape ever since President Trump took office in the White House. And our leaders are ridiculous. They're crazy. As a result of the crazy of just about everybody in this country, there is nobody coming through for this challenge in the country, this issue, this problem in the country. The women therein, who make up, just like in most countries, pretty much half the population, and yet we're passing away anyway. Okay, our politicians are crazy. They are spinning on the spot, jumping up and down like kangaroos, and are unable at all to maintain basic things going. Therefore, how much less enabled are issues of women on the ground as a result of our government dropping the ball and a lot of occult involvement, a lot of crazy stuff that people do. We are now, like I said, I would put out their statistics, the worst country to live in the world when it comes to being a woman. If you are a woman and you are South African, you are living in the worst country to be that gender. I would go so far as to qualify that and say that it is largely black women that are suffocating at the hands of gender-based violence in this country. White women do suffocate. We do remember that Rieva Steenkamp was killed. They also are endured through that. But it's largely black women that suffocate. It might be because we are a largely black country. We are in Africa. So whenever stats get spewed out, it likely will imply that blacks are the most affected, right? However, there is a marked difference, an observable one. It is stark, it is clear, it is overt, and it is stellar, the way that it glistens. Difference in the treatment of women by men of other demographics other than black. Like I said, observably. It is observably stark. The treatment of women between black men and literally everybody else. We are a nation that is diverse. We've got many races. And the four that are particularly highlighted in documentation and the law, etc., seeing as they were covered under Group Areas Acts of the apartheid regime, are black, colored, white, and Indian. Yes, there are Chinese here, Asians from Korea, etc. There are maybe Hispanics. There are many different kinds of races that are in South Africa, but largely the ones that get recognized by the government are the four that I've highlighted because they make up the biggest demographics in the country, and they were covered by legislation systematically under historical laws. So therefore they are the biggest populations of the country, the biggest of which is black. And so out of all other races included, apart from these, whites, Indians, and coloreds, and blacks, black people, black women, black men in particular, there is a marked, observable difference in the way that they treat women versus everybody else. I'm not saying that there are no violent white men or Indian or colored. Our gender-based stats make it clear that that's not true. They are across the race spectrum, but the biggest afflictors, proportionally even, if you were to put scale on it, on a graph where you would scale it in order to make 1-to-1 in terms of a ratio of white man versus black man, or Indian man versus black man, colored man versus black man, and all other races being made equal. Even if we were to put it on a scale, in other words, proportionality matters. In other words, the sheer numbers or the volumes are irrelevant. Even if you were to put it on scale, to proportionate, I don't know what the word is, there would still, just in terms of percentages, be a huge difference in terms of how white men proportionally, even though they're significantly less in number than black men, Indian men proportionally, even though they're significantly less in number than black men, and colored men proportionally, even though they are significantly lesser in number than black men, are far less abusive, far less, by a landslide, of their women. It's just a basic fact. However, we've got an irresponsible government in this country. Across the board, frankly, there is no politician that I trust, okay? Too irresponsible to admit the impediments inside the black community. I'm sorry, I'm doing edits here because I have got to, okay? Otherwise, I'm going to be behind. There is a massive, huge, gargantuan issue. Oh, goodness gracious, man. I really can't do this. Yeah, our government is very, very irresponsible. Our government is irresponsible, and in their irresponsibility, they lack accountability. They will never say, okay, I did it. And for as long as you can never say, I did it. For as long as you refuse to acknowledge that some flaw, some systematic error is your fault, there will never be healing. Such structures have to be uprooted by... Such structures must necessarily be uprooted by essentially what would be the tantamount of a coup, like a structure that is a monolith that must be brought low by a revolution, a revolt. It has to be ripped apart like a carpet from the four walls of a house, like a wall-to-wall carpet, where there is an infestation of some insect. You've got to rip that whole carpet apart and then fumigate, bring in some construction workers to re-tile or re-carpet. If at all you're going to live properly again, otherwise it's going to be maintained as a wimbawe. some kind of a forest. It's going to be maintained as wildlife in your house, because some structures are impossible to cure, to heal with corrective action. Some structures cannot be regressed from a state of comprehensive decomposition back to some kind of semblance of a normal existence. So therefore, what's necessary is for complete erasure, complete deletion, complete replacement in order for there to be any kind of healing. So the nation, and I've been prophesying this a lot in my previous content in my old channel, so please go check them out in my description box below, that channel out. Absent of the whole thing being uprooted, that is the South African government, all of it, as in literally all of it, absent of it being uprooted, the country will never heal, because we've got these politicians who, if at all, they're white, sometimes they're Uncle Toms to the black government. If they're white, they're sometimes Uncle Toms in the sense that they don't rebuke the black government, or if they're white, they just get ignored in the National Assembly, like Athol Trollip, when they start to raise issues against indiscretions on the ground, in particular as they are performed by black politicians. So it's like nobody can catch a break. So therefore, there's literally, it appears, no way for anybody to go. And for as long as we've got an accountability unpreparedness, an accountability taking unpreparedness on the part of our leaders, I use that word very loosely, insofar as we've got that for a problem, nobody's, like, women, South African black women in particular, are going to suffocate. Okay, like, God made Eve for Adam. He made women for men, for us to be helper suitables to them. And when they drop the ball pertaining their responsibility to protect, to cover, to have our back, they subjugate a creation that came later, that came afterwards, to the tyranny of nakedness, to the tyranny of being abandoned to the elements. It's like a baby. I have a video that I have done where I indeed utilize the analogy of a brand spanking new baby to explain just how women are to men. Because just like women, we give birth to babies, and then, unlike some other animals in the wilderness, if we leave it there just lying, rolling around in its vomit and its feces, it will die. Absent of a human being being touched when it has just come out of a mother's womb, it literally can die. It will die. Human beings, not can, will. It is a determined thing. Human beings cannot survive without human touch, without love, without adoration. Do you understand? Without care. We have to be, like most mammals, raised by that which brings us forth, for us to be a thriving, going concern. Otherwise we will die. Even if we were to get fed intravenously by pipes, if we were to get fed intravenously by IVs, we will still perish with our basic needs met, because we don't have something so ethereal as human touch. It is important. Therefore, that which springs forth from you as a human being, given that you're not made like an animal that can abandon its young or eat its young after it's born, we necessarily comprehend as people that it's important to take care of babies so they can survive, so they can get to the age of 1 month, and then 2 months, and then 1 year, so babies can grow from strength to strength and not pass away from abandonment, because that's a total thing. Neglect can kill a newborn baby. We survive it as grown-ups because we eventually become self-sufficient, self-preserving, self-enduring, self-lingering. So we can take care of ourselves when we have been thrown in solitary confinement, when we've been thrown in isolation. We as grown-ups can still survive that. But there will be a severity of depression that could cause so much despondent and despair that you might end your own life, because there is a problem when there is no touch to the human being or company to fellow human beings. You put them in a position to die, and babies totally die altogether, literally physiologically. They pass away, their systems shut up when there is no care from a grown-up, when there is no affection, no holding the baby. I'm sorry, I struggle to multitask, but as soon as I am done with this edit, I will be 100% yours. Okay, yeah, so seeing as mothers bring forth, I used this analogy in one of my other videos. I'm sorry if I'm being repetitive, but I guess that's the nature of instruction, right? Seeing as babies pass away when brought forth from a mother that neglects it, or that dies and the baby's just left there. Eve came from Adam. She was made from his rib. So she is essentially like the almost equivalent tantamount genetically like offspring, except it's a wife. the Lord fashioned Eve from Adam. And so it was necessarily God's instruction that Adam should take care of Eve. Do you understand? It was bone of his bone, flesh of his flesh. Adam was to steward the human being that is in front of him, that is Eve, with carefulness. He was to gaze upon her safety with intentionality. It was important that Adam care that Eve is okay. And seeing as Adam was here first, it was also his duty to train her up on these streets, the ropes. He was supposed to show her the ropes. He was supposed to tell her what he named every animal. He was supposed to basically give her a tour of the garden, just like the way that you would if a friend came to see your house. It's your house, you've decorated it. If you don't give them a tour, you are an irresponsible host, and they are an abandoned or neglected guest in your house. And so when they leave you with a horrible review, you deserve it. That's what happened, right? Adam, because he was yet to be fallen, when he embraced Eve at first, successfully achieved all that loving of Eve, all that appreciating of Eve, much like the same way that you would love and appreciate a newborn baby if you want it. When it's in your hands now that you've given birth to it, there is an inherent sense of duty that you feel towards that baby and an immediate protectiveness that you have over it. You know that it has to get to age 1, 2, 3, and that absent of you, it will not get there. There is an inherent understanding that this baby is in danger. It is a fatal mistake to abandon it. Therefore, in a similar state, it ought to be gazed, comprehended by men, that it is a danger, a fatal mistake. It is violently lethal to neglect women, to abandon them to the elements. You are putting them in a position to die very shortly after you ditch them. And thanks to not exercising self-control over your urges in this regard, you then eliminate, obliterate that which God literally put you to sleep in order to fashion for your benefit. Because he did, after all, say, "It's not good for Adam to be alone. I will therefore make Eve for him." It was a gift from God. Upon making an observation, rightly so, as he ought, that man is not supposed to be alone. When then you are awarded a gift and you don't rightly steward it, understand that the loss of that gift, because it now has perished, the loss of that gift because it died, the loss of that baby that you neglected because now it's died from neglect, will sting, it will hurt, it will bereave you, it will leave a void, it will absolutely shatter you. And so therefore, when you, never mind by neglect, but deliberately go out of your way to abandon Eve, you are putting yourself in a position to endure an inevitable bereavement that you, for some strange reason, anticipated you are not going to feel, because you were in a fever of demonic possession that made you think that you can do without Eve, in the same way that every so often Eve irresponsibly thinks she can do without Adam. I had a whole 11-part series that I recorded that I'm still gonna share, where I speak about this very issue, where I highlight on this very matter, that it's irresponsible for women to say they don't need men. Similarly too, it is irresponsible for men to say that they can do without women. Women were given men to steward, and women were given to men that men may steward them responsibly, and women were also then given instructions as to how to be under this steward. Same way that children have rules. They are not ever seen as children, seeing as they are the ones that we produce, we manufacture, we make them. They do not come out being the ones that we made a decision to bring into this world, rightly entitled to merely exist and then do nothing with the fact that we brought them into this place. Is therefore a flawed argument by a child to say, I didn't ask to be born, so please, I don't gotta listen to you. You're the one that decided to bring me into this place. God awards precepts for every last being that lands on the planet. And to children, he tells them, obey your parents. This is the first commandment with a promise. He tells parents that in the heart of a child dwells a great deal of folly, but the rod of discipline drives it away from him. Therefore, right next to adoring this infant, that it might grow from strength to strength, are rules, because you don't get to make like Sia and swing on a chandelier and do whatever you want. If you don't obey these rules, similarly too is the life of the child in danger if the kid will not respect the authority of the parents. They put themselves in harm's way when they ignore the rules of their mom and dad and of society in totality. They could literally die because they don't obey their parents' rules. So it is self-preserving by children to obey their parents in the same way that it is the dutiful, responsible thing by parents to gaze upon children as their responsibility, that the kids might not die. It's a symbiotic relationship that is mutually beneficial. The mother and the father gain parenthood that can be very rewarding, and the son and the daughter gain protection, love from mom and dad, alongside a lingering concern as a person, a future that is built for them, that is stewarded, protected by parents, and in exchange, this child just gotta keep themselves in a bunch in the house. They don't get to throw their toys out the cot. They must contribute their own in the household. They must wash dishes. They must make sure their bed is made in the morning. They must do homework. They must respect teachers, etc. So it is a symbiotic relationship, and when any of the parties in this ecosystem don't care to adhere to what God will tell them to do, of course structures fall apart, families fall apart, kids become miscreants, delinquents, full of misdemeanors, hard to manage, while parents just become these absolutely irresponsible, despondent randos that cause children to be traumatized from a plethora or a slew of random actions that they walked in thinking that kids can take it. Well, yes, Eve too popped out of Adam. She was suddenly there after she was extracted from his rib. He woke up from a deep slumber and discovered that Eve was right over there, and then said, "Oh, this at last is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh." That was within no right standing for Eve to then be like, "I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be made. I didn't ask that you should pursue me, Shelami. I'm not the one that saw me on the rugby field when I was cheering on the rugby team at the finals of some high school match. I did not, upon you being a little jock of a rugby player, upon you gazing at me in the bleachers, sitting over there, pom-pomming, cheering on the school team. I did not ask for you to land your lackluster eyes on me, gaze at me, and imagine me spectacular, pretty, and fantastic, or whatever. Enough for you to stumble around and trip on the rugby floor because I was so pretty, and then after the rugby match is over, see it fit to overwhelm your own guababa and then come and pursue me. I didn't ask you to shella me because from a distance you imagined, oh rugby jock, this at last is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. I didn't ask you to have a crush on me. I didn't ask you to think I'm cute. So frankly, upon me agreeing to be your girlfriend and then fiance, ultimately graduating over to marriage when we're both 22, I, seeing as you brought me forth and decided that you're gonna bring me in your camp as your thing to steward, I don't owe you anything because after all you pursued me. I don't owe you anything because after all you spotted me. I don't owe you anything because after all you're the one that decided to pay for my pizza. You're the one that decided to buy me my first car. You're the one that decided to teach me how to drive so I can drive that first car. You're the one that decided to take the matter out of my parents' hands and pay for my university tuition because you thought you were a big man and everything. I don't owe you all this hard work that is involved in being a wife and a mom and a steward of the affairs of my household. I don't gotta, cause like you spotted me when I was just 17 and you were 18. You are the one that decided that you're gonna shake in your pants and then pursue the prettiest girl in school. I don't owe you respect, honor, humility, alongside taking care of your gangster behind. Now that you're a grown man out here with a grown man job in corporate South Africa and you've lost your beef muscles from high school because you didn't make the university team, I don't owe you jack, especially considering now you've got cover. Eve can say that and Eve keeps saying that in 2025. But Eve could not be more wrong, because while it was indeed the prerogative of this jock rugby player Adam to pursue her from a distance, seeing something sparkling in the bleachers, this woman, by God's ordained instruction, automatically ought feel a sense of duty to serve, submit under the man that pursues her, that she agrees to be with. And when she then drops that ball, she then puts Adam in a position to also perish from neglect, abandonment, also perish from solitary confinement that can land a man over to suicide. Suicide, of which in this instance is largely spiritual more than it is physical, because death in the scriptures is described as spiritual. It commences at a spiritual level before it becomes physiologically a thing. Before you actually code and flatline, you are born spiritually coded and spiritually flatlined. We are born spiritually dead in sense that our parents conceive us, and there is none of us that does good, not even one, for all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Therefore, given that we are born essentially hell-bound, absent of us embracing Christ, we will end up there anyway. Yeah. Spiritual death in this instance can be maintained in a man in the climate of a gangster female. It is written in God's word that a great girl in the life of a man is like a crown of glory on the head of this man, but a gangster Delilah woman is rottenness in his bones. Rottenness is a putrefaction, it is a decomposition process that lends a person over to the ground from where they commenced. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust, for from the dust you were manufactured, O Adam, and to the dust you will return, because you saw it fit to fall apart thanks to Eve, and you following after your wife when you were supposed to rather be the leader. You get recovered to the dust, and absent of embracing the second Adam, you do not get resurrected unto life, but rather to condemnation and everlasting strife. So, death in a human being is maintained, that putrefaction, that rotting, that perpetuating decomposition is maintained when they're in the company of nasty. When they're in the company of nasty folk, they are maintained in a deadness. Do you understand? And so therefore do not get defibrillated, brought back to life like Lazarus, who was told to come forth by Jesus. You don't rise again when you don't embrace the cross. There is no other name given among men by which we must be saved other than the name of Jesus. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. Okay. Adam is hugely disincentivized from ever embracing the second Adam when he's dealing with a recalcitrant Eve that has no regard for her roles. But similarly too, in the very opposite extreme, so too is Eve disincentivized from ever turning her life over to God truly in the company of a crazy Adam. Because of the fact that this striving between men and women is used by Satan. After all, he does come after the woman, that would be Israel, but also the woman that was the first to be used to tempt, to fall apart in the garden. If Satan can get to women and just make them really crazy lackluster, he can condemn literally an entire country through the folly of Eve, because Adam acts in a very suicidal capacity when Eve doesn't make sense, okay? By suicide, I don't mean the physical act of grabbing a noose and killing yourself, but the spiritual act of maintaining yourself in spiritual death and not taking up the second Adam, or at least patronizing the second Adam, who is Jesus Christ, with your mere profession of faith on your lips, albeit not knowing him from a bar of soap. Bad girls make for gangster husbands, is what I'm getting at. And so too do gangster husbands make for horrific women that the Bible says the earth cannot bear up under an unloved woman who gets married. Therefore this rebellion between men and women does no other thing but lend men and women to the flames of hell. At the end of their lives, when their silver cords are cut, they just hop in like Olympic swimmers into a swimming pool, molten lava, having deceived themselves in some instances that they're going to heaven because they've made a mere profession of Jesus Christ on their lips, okay? I'm here to try and make a case for Christ, for women to escape condemnation, and also to help them understand that it doesn't have to be so gangster. It doesn't have to be so terrible. It doesn't have to be so ridiculous when it comes to men. Listen, okay? The road is narrow that leads to eternal life, and only a few people find it. But the road is broad that leads to destruction, and most earth dwellers enter into it, and so they perish for all of eternity, dying a second death over and over again. It must therefore be comprehended that hard as it is to find a good man, it is possible, but that difficulty to find a good man is only because the Bible is true. The road is skinny like an anorexic that leads to life. And there's only a few of these men that find it. It's written in the Lord's word, a faithful man who can find. Same way that it's written in God's word in Proverbs 31, an excellent wife who can find. They are just as rare in each camp, and it is the prerogative of each camp dweller to wait on the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to him, to the Father, but through him, to help them find each other. Especially in this 2025 where it's ridiculously cancerous. Roaming the streets of dating South Africa and anticipate that by merely putting up a profile in a Christian website that you're going to meet a Christian man. Not everyone, Matthew 7, it is written in God's word, who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. For they will say to me at the last day, Lord, Lord, have I not prophesied in your name, and in your name did many mighty miracles, and in your name cast out many demons? And Jesus will tell them, depart from me, worker of iniquity, I never knew you. These are people with Christian activity, however, God did not know them. There was no intimate relationship between him and them. They were lukewarm, so he spat them out of his mouth like chicken bones after you've been gnawing at them for a very long time because they're from KFC. Okay. Jesus Christ does not know the grand majority of professing Christians, but he knows a remnant, a small little number, because God has always been the God of the remnant. We know that's a thing because of Romans 11, Romans 9. Those who are his people will no longer be his people, and then he will engraft the Gentiles and call them his people to make the Jews jealous. In the end, in Jacob's trouble, only a remnant of Jews, a third to be exact, are salvaged for redemption. God has always been the God of the minority, evidenced even by Matthew 7, where the road is narrow that leads to life. It is also evidence to this narrowness and this therefore difficulty to find true saints in one of the Thessalonian books, where it is spoken that there is going to be a great apostasy in the last day. Many are going to depart from the faith. People are going to give heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of demons. I think it might be one of the Timothys as opposed to the Thessalonians, but it's in the Bible. They give heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of demons and having itching ears. This is now in 2 Timothy 3, I'm aware of it, or 4. They gather for themselves a great number of teachers to teach them what their itching ears want to hear. The 9-part series that is taking me 10 years to edit, in there I speak about these individuals that aren't truly of God but that claim to be. It is therefore not at all safe, even in the slightest, to throw yourself in a Christian website for dating, hoping that you're going to meet a Christian man because, like Karabo, you're like 40 years old. And the reason why I'm speaking about a Christian dating website right now is because social media is like Tinder for just about everybody. Even though you don't actually upload a profile for yourself intentionally in a dating website, you could end up meeting somebody the way that you end up meeting somebody in dating websites, by simply being present on social media at all. People can find you, all right? Especially when you have got an account that enables for direct messaging. YouTube doesn't really have that, but if a person goes into your, what do you call this thing? Into your main landing page as a content creator on YouTube, they can find your email address if at all you're any kind of responsible YouTuber, because if you are monetized or if you intend to get spoken to by people who might interact with your ministry, you have to put your email address down, because that's how brand deals get etched in the ground. That's how people communicate with you. But it's very hard to find this email address by Lay Janes and Lay Joes, because they don't know to go on the landing page on YouTube. But if you, as a content creator, which I do, have got a contact me in your description box, as in you make it clear that if you want to talk to me, you can holler at me, and you put that either in a pinned comment or in your description box below, they can just, you know, copy that email address, plonk it into an email, and then send you an email. And some of these people who are sending you an email are not merely trying to fellowship with you. They are not merely just trying to, you know, hang out with a sister in Christ or ask some questions out of curiosity. Essentially the purpose for which you put that email address down. Sometimes they're trying to pursue you, the same way that a guy scouring a dating website would try to pursue you. Because they find they basically swipe left, or is it swiping right or whatever, like on Tinder. They are interested in you and your profile. They like your photos. They like what you appear to be about. And so they are just sliding into your direct messages. That is a cesspool. Guys, I'm here to warn you. Okay, look, I'm pressed to pee. Let me go use the bathroom, and then we shall continue with this message. Okay, I have returned and I'm feeling relieved. Anyway, whatever. Overshare, you didn't need to know that. Where did I last end? Yes, sometimes you put your contact details in your description box and then people contact you from there. it's almost impossible in 2025, if you've got any kind of social media presence, for people to not slide into your DMs somehow, even if you don't put your email address out there, unless of course you are Elon Musk or whatever, where people absolutely and comprehensively cannot write you, they cannot send you a message unless you go out of your way to really just close off. That way people are just not going to find you. Also, as people can very easily find you, and also the possibility, the likelihood for a person to respond to a direct message is significantly increased when you are lowly, when you are essentially nobody, you haven't arrived, and when as a woman you don't have that protection that I spoke about, that Adam owes Eve, essentially just by mere virtue of him waking up and finding her there. When you don't have it, psychologically that's just the way that it is, okay? God himself manufactured that psychology in us. He built it into us. We were made for fellowship as human beings, and so therefore when it's absent, we will seek it out. Love thirst, that's why it's called a thirst trap. When some random dude is offering you some kind of service and making that an observation, therefore, upon offering you that service, that you're in dire need of it. These thirst traps, the only reason why they work is because we've been built to have a thirst for human fellowship. It's not an error to want love. It is the right thing. And anybody that tries to sear that or shove it down into their subconscious or whatever is doing themselves a disservice, because eventually when you bottle stuff in, you pop, you burst, okay? Therefore it is right and the human thing to do to desire love, and there is no shame in that. The shame is in the one who is withholding it from you as a means of punishment, and the shame is in the one who is swallowing it precisely because they make an observation that nobody's awarding it. The shame is in a last days world that hates one another, betrays one another, and because of an increase in lawlessness, the love of those people grows cold, like it's written in Matthew 24. When people withhold affection from you, it is not shameful for you to still linger and long for it, because that's how God made us. Shame is on them. The shame is on the individual that's going out of their way to thirst you until you take anything at all. So the most vulnerable women, which is a video who are the audience that I'm trying to get to right now, among the most vulnerable women are those who have not been made to enjoy that which would be the responsibility of men in society, as they are ordained in such a fashion as that by God. Adam made, then Eve. Adam, upon observing Eve, inherently then understands a duty within himself to protect her, to shield her, to cover her, to have her back, to make sure that she is a maintained concern, something that's just going to keep on beating and beating and beating the heart therein. He had a prerogative to maintain that life force in her, so he immediately wore responsibility, a vestige of such responsibility as that, on himself prior to the fall. But, and I make mention of this time and time again in my other videos, so I'm not going to expand on it too much. The fall, God judged us as the human race, and among the judgments were, Adam, you're going to try and lord it over Eve with an iron fist. Essentially, you're going to be megalomaniacal and abuse authority, and Eve is going to so desire your affection and your protection. After all, she's like your baby. She's like your child. You know how a child is when you abandon it as a parent. It takes forever and a day for it to get calloused against you as a parent. It'll literally follow you around groveling for scraps of your affection. It'll cheer you on and protect you in school and not tell people that you're abusing it for very long before it eventually develops such a strong callous against an irresponsible parent that there's nothing you can do to recover that kid to the parent. How long did it take you if you've got a deadbeat dad? How long did it take you if you've got a deadbeat mom to write them off? I personally can vouch for that. My dad was a deadbeat dad, and it took me literally when I was finally working in corporate South Africa to finally write him off. All throughout my prepubescent, my preteen years, my primary, my preschooler years, my high school years, my adolescent years, and even early adulthood, I thoroughly was still trying to give this guy a chance. Because that's just what happens when you are progeny, when you are offspring, or when you are a derivative of some other human being. You will always want to see the best side of them. You will always make excuses for them. You will always have hope that they'll come around because they were made to love you. You came from them, and so they had a duty to love you. They were supposed to love you. And when they don't, given that you have no other mom, given that you have no other dad, you then will grovel at their feet all the way up until you're a young adult. You will grovel at their feet all the way until you're a young adult. But over time, the pain that they endure you through, just the yo-yo, the ping-pong match of insanity that they perpetually walk in, calluses you. But how long did it take? 2 decades. How long did it take? 2.5 decades. You had to get to a quarter-life crisis as a 25-year-old to finally realize that your dad is never coming around. At which stage you then start to compensate for the lack of dad or the lack of mom, this lack of relationship. And unfortunately, this compensation, if at all you don't give your life to Christ, tends to look something like women capitulating and sucking the living daylights up out of men that are horrific in order to satiate their adoration or their love, their desire, their thirst for dadhood, for a father figure. And then men become Oedipus, unfortunately, where it is that they are perpetually suckling at the breasts without maturing, without growing, of their women. Their girlfriends become their moms, and they therefore demand the same kind of services that you would get from your mother. They take care of you, these older women, in spite of your disrespect, in spite of how much you keep on dropping the ball, in spite of the fact that you don't want to go to school, in spite of the fact that you've impregnated the next door neighbor's teenage girl, in spite of your mom is still there for you. Your mom, when you get arrested, is the one that's besooking you in prison because you slapped a girl and now you've been arrested for gender-based violence. She's the one that's there in court even though your dad is upset, in spite. So it's just a violence of Oedipal complex, and it's an Oedipus complex type establishment thing. And if the absent figure in question here was not so much the mom but the dad, you then get this kid that's supplementing his belief of what it means to be a man with other kids who are yet to establish a sense of morality, a sense of the world, a sense of the earth as to how it ought be, a sense of the true God-ordained patriarchy and how it benefits society. And so they make their boys their dad figure. And seeing as you're all growing up, you're teenagers or you're young adults who are yet to establish any kind of responsibility in your bones, they then either become gangsters or just belonging to this like crazy man cave of misogynistic thought that hates women, and all they can do in this little hub is speak smack against the other gender that was made for them, that they have a duty to protect, and that they can callous over the years when they mistreat it until they become these bitter broads, these angry women, and in my case angry black women, that are essentially irrecoverable from the precipice of death due to how angry they are. And so the cycle goes on and goes forth. A lack of adequate parenting or a lack of adequate fathering or mothering, whether or not the parent is present in the household, not fulfilling their God-ordained functions, produces either of these extremes. In women, it makes them sappy for bad boys, and men indefinitely until they get calloused, while men just come up with their own doctrines of demons and destructive heresies as to how to be men because they are on a mission to handle women that need no handling. Yeah, that's what happens when you hope someone is gonna do better and then just doesn't. Okay? You hold on to them until you establish your own sense of how the world ought to be, but that is a reaction or a response to the pain, the lack, the irresponsibility on the part of a human being that calloused you against how you ought to be in the sight of God. Yeah, stuff like that happens. So therefore women, when they are like children who have a deadbeat mom or a deadbeat dad, when they are not well treated by boyfriends, husbands, fiancés, men that are supposed to care for them, dads, whoever is supposed to have the back of the female community, when they are perpetually disappointed by men, they will make like that young kid growing up that desperately longs for their dad to be responsible, but their dad just isn't. We'll stick to the example of the dad because that was my situation. Desperately long for a dad to be responsible, and all the way up until your quarter life, you still are hopeful that somebody's gonna come around that just never does. Yeah, somewhere along the way, after that, there is a final disappointment. There is a last disappointment. There is a hurdle that is hopped over. That is the final one. And at that final hurdle of disappointment, there is a callousing of unforgiveness and a callousing of a manufacturing of a worldview that is absolutely warped because it has not God in it, that then produces what the Bible calls an unloved woman that gets married. The earth cannot bear up under her. It produces that woman that is rottenness in the bones of a man. It makes a prostitute out of a woman that then becomes angry at virtuous women. It produces a woman that by any means necessary, I'm gonna get mine. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get ahead, and this time around I'm not gonna care about anybody. It makes irresponsible moms. It makes narcissistic moms over daughters. It makes mothers who literally make their sons their second husbands and so endure through the tyranny of momster-in-law, these men's brides, okay? Like that horrible mother-in-law that you can't stand. It produces things like these. Because of deadbeat, irresponsible fathering and mothering, there is something that happens inside a woman that started out dating. A woman that started out coy and dainty and a breath of fresh air becomes insufferable later on. Why does she become insufferable? Like I said, because of the irresponsibility of being adored. So when you don't fulfill your purpose as a man as ordained over you by God, not man's rules or your own viewpoint of the world, but Jesus, when you completely ignore this, you completely ignore that God explicitly told you, love Eve the way that Christ loved the church. He gave his life for her. So do the exact same thing. Lay yourself prostrate on the floor. Do not merely gaze at her being all pretty and then be like, this at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, and then just sit. Gather dust. Expect yourself in a kingly demeanor to be fed, satiated by this groveling woman whose judgment was to essentially desire you for all the days of her life. That was Eve's judgment. Her judge, like proper, you know that it is a judgment. You know that it is problematic to imagine that there's nothing wrong, with women loving men, desiring them all the days of their lives. You know that it's erroneous for you to not see it as a problem when it is passed down as a judgment. It was not a gift or an award that Eve would love her husband unconditionally. It was a judgment. In other words, she would be loving a man that was simply not reciprocate. But in spite of how much he's not reciprocating, she will still salivate after that love. She would nibble away at his toes. She will follow him around. And if at all this man is not responsibly instructed by the God of the universe to award her the love she longs for, Eve will then make like that teenage girl that eventually at the age of 23 gets over her deadbeat dad and then becomes mean. So these women that start out soft and coy and dainty become hardened. You barely recognize them. They look in the mirror and there is nothing but a calloused woman. They become like Medusa. One look in their eye and a man is turned into stone. That is what is produced. And when you are Medusa, when you're Medusa, you cannot serve God. You cannot serve God when you are that calloused, when you are that wicked, when you are that hateful of young women, when you are that resentful of your own children, when you lack desire for the bringing up of your own offspring, when you are a tactless mother that does anything at all to get ahead, when you keep on sleeping with all the butmadlisas of the suburb in order to pay for your child's school fees, you will not enter the kingdom of God. When you've got a mindset as a woman that I will do whatever it takes to get ahead because these guys ain't jack and they will keep on hurting you, so every man for himself, I gotta have mine, I gotta take care of